continues to escalate. NATO saying it's ready to step up and defend alliance member Turkey.
Another big story today on our next guest is just back from a trip to Turkey. Says the investment community is waiting for the United States to act. Halima Croft is with us from Barclays, senior geopolitical strategist there. What does that mean? That they think the U.S. is going to come in and...
We were asking when the United States was going to come in. That was a big concern amongst the Turkish investors that I spoke with. They said the security situation is deteriorating. They're increasing attacks on Turkish soldiers coming from Syria. And they were wondering when the United States would do what it did in Libya, really provide strong support for the rebels. And I was sort of alarming them when I said I don't think the United States is going to come in anytime soon. And so really Turkey's on its own.
Would you link for us, Halima, what is at stake here? Because Syria, we look at Syria, it doesn't produce much oil at all, and then Turkey, but then you have to factor in Iraq, the critical nature of the production out of Iraq to offset what we've lost, or the world has lost rather,
coming out of Iran. And nowhere else can we add so much oil to the market from conventional supply as Iraq. I mean, the report that just came out today was talking about Iraq going to 6 million barrels a day by 2020. No other country can put an additional 3 million barrels on the market like Iraq could. And so if Iraq, the security situation were to deteriorate because of events in Syria, that can have significant implications for the production profile. But it's countries like Jordan as well, it's countries like Lebanon. Syria is at the heart of the Middle East. And so if this thing drags on, it could be ugly for a number of nations.
And it seems to get worse by the day, but by the week, it escalates. In other words, I thought it was interesting to hear you say right at the top that the people over there are assuming or wondering whether the United States is going to get involved. That seems to be a step further than we've thought about it here. We're all kind of assuming we won't get involved, and maybe we should be thinking about it differently. I don't know.
Absolutely. And you know, when I was in Turkey, I mean, they assumed that the Turkish government would not be so forward-leaning if they didn't have a quiet word from the United States and the rest of NATO, that they would have their back. Now, what's interesting in terms of the Obama administration is he's given no signal that he's really willing to do anything more. And even Mitt Romney has talked about providing more support for the rebels, but it's not really clear. No one's talking about active intervention on the side of the Syrian rebels.
No. Do you have any, is there any reason to believe that President Obama would do something while we're trying to get out of Afghanistan, do something with Syria?
No, the only thing I would watch for is, do they transfer the chemical weapons to Hezbollah? I think that is a significant red line. So if the Assad forces were to do that, I think that would precipitate some much bigger crisis and draw on the United States. But barring that, or barring some major attack on Turkey, I think we're in this gruesome, ugly stalemate.
For how long?
Oh, it can drag on. I mean, could it drag on for a year? Yes. A year, 2 years? Yes.
Because we mentioned at the top what the impact on the presidential election here in the United States would be, but you think it'll just be kind of status quo through November and beyond?
I think so. I mean, again, if we part of providing the rebels with things like shoulder-fired missiles that could take down the government's helicopter gunships, that would be potentially a game changer. But barring that, if we don't really up the supply of weapons to the rebels, they have enough weapons to stay in the game, but maybe not enough to do a big kill on the Assad government. So I think essentially it grinds on.
What about the overall picture for oil production in the Middle East? I mean, you mentioned the outlook for Iraq, but are we in this area where you think we'll be at $90 a barrel for months and months, maybe even years?
Well, you know, we look at next year and we say, you know, we have 125 for our call for Brent for next year. Now, that's based on the fact that, again, we see the supply side remaining constrained. And when we look at Iraq becoming the second largest producer in OPEC, that also worries us because, you know, 365 people were killed in the month of September. That was the second highest, it was the highest monthly death toll in 2 years. The security situation is very fragile. It hasn't affected the oil side yet. But if it does, you could really see companies pull back from production, and that could have a big impact on the market.
All right. Halima, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Awesome to see you, because we know how time constrained you are. To get